Coming up on This Week in Computer Hardware, Intel's drastic price drop on high-end CPUs, Microsoft's new folding Android phone Surfaces, along with a slate of new devices, Ryzen Pro 3000, Corsair Virtuoso RGB headsets reviewed, and more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiCH.
This is TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 536, recorded on October 3rd, 2019. Blue Light Special, Intel CPUs now half off. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your online privacy with one click. Yes, it's that easy. For 3 extra months free with a 1-year package, go to expressvpn.com/twitch. Welcome to TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, TWiCH weekly show that aims to bring you the most delightful, most shocking, most confusing, most affordable, most expensive, most powerful, and generally speaking, we're aiming to bring the most useful and helpful hardware reviews and news we can find. I'm Patrick Norton, joined as always by Sebastian Pete from PCPer.com, who, I might point out, ladies and gentlemen, nailed it on the head with the idea that Intel was going to have to drop their prices considerably to compete with AMD this fall. Sebastian.
I take credit for it. If I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. It's all me. But yeah, I mean, wasn't it pretty obvious that when the Ryzen 3000 processors came out and we looked at the pricing, let's just compare the unobtainable Ryzen 9 3900X to whatever Intel has that offers 12 cores and 24 threads. And if you go on Amazon right now and look for it, that processor is $1,200 from Intel. Right. And the AMD processor, if you can find it at list price, because it's in demand, and we've already talked about them having trouble keeping up with demand. These are pop products and 7 nanometer at TSMC and all of that. But $500 is a little bit less than $1,200. In fact, it's a little bit less than half of $1,200.
It's considerably less than half.
Yeah, you know what? And probably numbers that I can't do in my head right now. More than 50%. 40% as much.
It's a huge delta, and it's something. But yeah, Intel has managed throughout the years to keep their prices high, keep these massive margins in place. They've used that as a club to offer discounts to discourage competition from other processor manufacturers, from their major vendors, their major clients. And finally, they're up against the wall. And I believe we're looking at reductions up to 50% on some of these parts. Is that correct?
Yeah. And in fact, almost exactly. But it really depends on what we'll see as far as street prices. The prices that were on the slide that Intel has released are 1,000K or 1,000 unit trade prices, 1K US dollar trade prices. So when you're not buying in that quantity, it might be a little bit more. We'll see what street prices look like. But just going based on this chart, and for audio listeners, there were only 4 SKUs announced at this point. And this announcement came right after a big leak. And I believe this slide was one of the things that was leaked, or at least the information from this slide. So Intel went ahead and said, you know what, we're just going to release this now. I believe there's more information to come, but what we know now is that the new Intel X series, this is the Cascade Lake X. This is the high-end desktop, so it's not going to be your standard desktop, not going to run on Z390. This is X299 stuff. 4 SKUs, starting with the Core i9-10900X, and they're up to 5 digits now, so it's 10900X. And that entry level is going to be a 10-core, 20-thread part for $590. So already you can see, I mean, that is more, obviously, than the 3900X. I think what they're doing here is kind of selling this based on clock speeds as well, because turbo boost on this is up to 4.5 gigahertz, and this series goes up to 4.8 turbo. But the next one up is the i9-10920X. That's 12 cores, 24 threads. That's the one that matches the 3900X from AMD. That is $689. And then it goes up to the 10940X, which is 14 cores, 28 threads at $784, and tops out at the Core i9-10980XE, their Extreme Edition part, which is going to be 18 cores, 36 threads, and is $979. And what's fascinating to me about that is you can buy the current Extreme Edition part that is 18 cores, 36 threads is $1,899. So basically $1,900. And
I was going to say it launched at almost $2,000 was MSRP, right? I mean, that's a huge drop in price. Huge.
Yeah. So looking at this, for one of the things I immediately think of is what are they going to do with the stuff that's already out there in the supply chain? One thing I've heard is that they're not going to be lowering prices. I think Ian Cutress at AnonTech said that they're not lowering prices on existing processors out there. So good luck selling one of those $1,900 CPUs when one hits the market for $1,000. That's a little bit faster and obviously half the cost. But this is massive to see price cuts this aggressive. And you can still say, looking at the Ryzen parts, the value is still with AMD. I think Intel will probably try to sell their platform on single-threaded performance because of some of these clocks that we're seeing on this chart. Right. But we'll have to see how these actually perform and what the benchmarks look like. One important thing is, and this was an advantage that AMD has definitely had, it's PCIe lanes. And definitely if you're on a desktop Intel system, you are rather starved for PCIe, where your CPU is only bringing 16 lanes to the table. These are, I believe they have 24, there's 24 lanes on the X299 chipset, but this is up to 72 lanes is the new total platform lanes here, which I assume means 48 lanes from these parts. And these are going to be drop-in, work on X299 with a BIOS update, as far as I know. So, and even though this morning I saw a gigabyte motherboard release, it was an X299X. These are meant for the existing high-end desktop platform. There's not a new chipset for these. So same architecture. It's still based on Skylake. There should be improvements in performance gen over gen just because of higher clocks and whatever other improvements they may have made. This is still 14 nanometer, 165 watt TDP. They're unlocked, so you can overclock these. And another thing, memory speed is higher. So that might be part of the benefit as well, depending on whether your application, whether your actual workflow involves the need for faster memory. The new standard for these is DDR4 2933. So that goes up a little bit as well. Still quad channel. So, I
mean, this is a huge change for Intel. And certainly a sign that AMD has had a dramatic impact on Intel. Impressive. Other thing that came out this week, AMD's Ryzen Pro 3000 processors. These are the lower wattage Zen 2 parts. Has anybody gotten hands-on with these, or is this more of an announcement with silicon to follow later?
I am looking to. I think it's they were saying the Elite Desk parts. Now this press release from AMD is saying available in September, which obviously that has come and gone. I'll have to see if any of these are actually shipping, because this is 65 watt TDP versions of Ryzen 3000, and of course there's some Zen Plus in here as well. The things like the Ryzen Pro 3400G, the processors with Radeon Vega graphics, those in the existing lineup from AMD are based on last year's CPU architecture and last year's GPU architecture. We don't have APUs with Zen 2 and Navi graphics, but the top three items that were released, the Ryzen 9, Ryzen 7, and Ryzen 5 Pro parts, those are simply lower clocked versions of those desktop parts we've already talked so much about. And the most interesting part to me is the Ryzen 9 Pro 3900, which takes the 3900X down to 65 watts with just some lower base and boost frequencies. Still have all the same, features, capabilities, level 3 cache. The models that were specifically mentioned are these HP Elite Desk 705 G5 small form factor and desktop mini systems. So these are small footprint systems that don't even have that high of a price tag. I think the starting price on these both is under $700. So for some of those smaller form factor business machines that you may or may not be familiar with, this is a way of getting a lot of cores, a lot of multi-thread power out of something that doesn't even require much in the way of fancy cooling at all. To cool 65 watts is pretty trivial, even in a smaller form factor enclosure. So very interesting to see. I can't wait until all of their products are based on the new cores, because we still, I have no news about them introducing anything with Navi graphics or Zen 2 on the APU side. But of course, that's coming probably with the consoles. I don't know if it's coming with the consoles first or if we'll see desktop parts first, but that's all coming down the pipe.
We wait with bated breath. Paul Thurrott did his usual epic wrap up on Microsoft hardware announcements. We'll talk about one of these a little bit more later in the show. I'll give you a hint. It's an Android phone that is a folding book style dual screen, but Surface Duo and the Surface Neo. Man, I mean, well, we'll talk about some now. I mean, the Surface Duo has two 5.6-inch screens, becomes an 8.3-inch quote device when folded or folds out to. And the Surface Neo is Windows 10X, two 9-inch displays, and it becomes a 13-inch device when everything's unfolded. Those are both coming holiday 2020. The Surface Pro X, which is their latest Surface Pro design, where they've gone for thinner, which I hope means they figure out a better way of cooling, a Surface Slim Pen that slides into that, and the Pro X signature keyboard. The Surface Laptop 3, they have a 15-inch version, maxing that out now. They have a metal finish along with Alcantara, which some people love and some people hate. Boosted the performance on that. Surface Pro 7 is pretty much the exact same design. Laptop class performance, laptop processors, reduced battery life compared to the Pro 6, but similar or better performance, but reduced battery life on that one. There's a lot going on here because that's not all, right?
Right.
Windows 10X, in case you're wondering what I was talking about, that's a new version of Windows 10 built for dual screen and folding screen devices. So essentially, it's a very, very stripped down bare bones version of Windows 10 that can run desktop apps, quote, via a container and improve security, to quote the article up on Thurrott.com. And then Surface earbuds, because what we need is another audio manufacturer of questionable style choice. I don't know. If you're watching the video, you can see the picture on that one. These things look like some of the massive oversized audiophile earbuds we've seen, with a fairly, it'll be interesting. Either this is a person with very, very tiny hands, or they went for a very massive enclosure on this one. I'm very, very curious to hear this. $249 definitely puts it into the fairly pricey earbud status, so they hopefully will sound amazing and have amazing microphones.
That picture, by the way, for audio listeners, imagine somebody pulling, moving a VR headset up to their eyes, like a small pair of binoculars. Right. That's what the case looked like. It was huge. Not pocketable, or just necessarily.
Well, yeah, unless maybe those are massive hands, and this is really, no, that's not right. Maybe these are incredibly tiny hands. In any case, they did a lot on this. They're claiming 24 hours of battery life, so apparently some chunk of that space. They look like the part outside your ear would be about the size of a quarter. They're claiming 2 microphones for ears, so they're doing some manipulation of audio to attempt to get you better microphone quality, which I am down for. And 24 hours of battery life. And we don't know if that's with the case, but I believe that actually is the earbuds themselves. And if they can deliver 24 hours of battery life on that and have a good microphone, it would kind of justify the massive sort of 70s earring scaling of these in-ear devices. Again, those are going to be available this holiday. We'll definitely get our earballs on those as soon as we can. Kind of fascinating, Android device. The Surface Duo. Oh, goodness. I was going to talk about this later because we have another announcement, so I'll stop. But part of what was interesting about this is they did some custom processors with AMD and Qualcomm. Right. The Surface Ryzen Edition and SQ1 processors. This was this was interesting to me that they created custom processors. Is part of this to enable them to minimize, sort of the TDP requirements, given their obsession with thin and fanless devices over at Microsoft?
They're definitely, the AMD part has a configurable TDP. So nominally it's 15 watts. It can go up to, I think it's either 20 or 22. So kind of what we saw with the Ice Lake stuff from Intel, where it has a configurable TDP you can choose. Manufacturers can go from 15 up to, I think, to 25 on the lower wattage parts. But yeah, I mean, and this is reserved for the big one. This is the 15-inch Surface exclusively, I believe, that has this custom Ryzen processor. And that Surface Pro X is the ARM, is the new SQ1 processor that was engineered with Qualcomm. But I mean, on the Ryzen front, and this is just more positive news for AMD. It seems like the year of AMD continues, and they're in the Surface now, which we've seen. I think we had up to 25 watt TDP parts in Surface Pros in the past, so this made perfect sense for AMD to come up with a part that met the energy requirements but provides the benefits of their. This is improved Zen Plus architecture, but on the mobile side, they don't have Zen 2 as of this point. Right. So like the 3000 series stuff on mobile is not the same as 3000 series stuff on desktop, as we've pointed out in the past. But still, it's a win for them. And it makes sense to me that it's in the larger screen device because it's going to have very powerful integrated graphics solution, probably weighted more towards graphics than CPU horsepower. And I'm looking for the actual part name. This is the 3780U, the Ryzen 7 3780U. And it's right on the die. It says Surface Edition. So I'm guessing this is not the same configuration of that you may found on a mobile part that already exists. But
right. Some of the specs are actually pretty impressive on this, especially the Surface Laptop 3. They're talking about like 80% charging in 1 hour. A 32 gigabytes of RAM on the 15-inch version. At least 16 gigabytes of RAM are available on the 13.5-inch version. They're talking about 11 and a half hours of battery life on both. This is, and I will say, actually, given how, I am a little hard on some of the designs from Microsoft, but, in terms of this, the Surface Laptop 3, at least you're talking about having USB-C, USB-A, and a decent amount of storage as an option, up to like 1 terabyte. So, but yeah, not in love with the Surface Connect port, just because, it's in a world of USB-C power, I would just prefer not to have the fancy port. I will say using the Surface Dock has been pretty nice that I've played around with over the time. I'm still kind of fascinated by the foldable Android phone, but we'll come back to that in a minute. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware brought to you by ExpressVPN. I've been using ExpressVPN. I've been using VPNs, period, for a long time. It's a way to make sure your network data is secure, to make sure nobody's sniffing your packets, at least packets that they can do anything with. And it's nice. You got a good VPN. You don't have to slow down your internet speed. It's easy for hackers to bypass Wi-Fi security and try to steal your information by exploiting flaws such as crack, that's key reinstallation attacks. If you use Wi-Fi at a hotel, a shopping mall, a coffee shop, you're basically sharing your data, your information. If you're not using it a VPN, anybody on there can pretty much do their best to get their Wireshark on or some other tool and analyze what you're doing. Try to think about it. Imagine if somebody knew exactly what you were doing on the internet while you were in the coffee shop or the hotel or the airport. If you want to encrypt all your data, make sure it can't be read by hackers, or just even accidentally use a VPN like ExpressVPN. It's really easy. Just download the app on your computer, your smartphone, and just use the internet as you normally would. You click a button, that'll secure all of your network data that's coming in and out of your computer. ExpressVPN is fast and reliable. It's recommended as the #1 VPN provider by TechRadar and CNET. ExpressVPN takes privacy and security to the next level. They even invented a technology called Trusted Server to ensure that VPN servers run from RAM and no data logs are written to a server's hard drive, even by accident. So they're doing their best to be a good, safe VPN host for you. If you want the best in online security and privacy protection, head on over to expressvpn.com/twitch for 3 extra months free with a 1-year package. Protect your internet today with the VPN we trust to keep data safe. Go to expressvpn.com/twitch to get started. We want to thank ExpressVPN for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. Oh my goodness. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that Surface Duo. How are you feeling about this compared to the other dual screen phones we've seen, right? First of all, I want to say there's a big stripe down the middle because of the way the hinge is there. It's a really nice hands-on on the Verge. They did a first look at the Surface Duo. It is not a particularly pocketable device unless you're wearing jeans that have even bigger pockets than my Carhartts.
This might surprise people who've been listening to me complain about such things for a while now, but my initial impression of this, having not held one yet, is I like this, and I like it a lot more than right now, early days, trying to make a folding device that's just as portable as a standard phone in and around like the 5 to 6 inch phone range. It's not really there yet because you pretty much have to make something that's double thickness, and you worry about this screen and its durability, and it's a seamless experience because the screen, has to open and is flexible. This is 2 discrete devices essentially held together with a hinge. It looks like a book. It's basically that courier concept from way back when, from Microsoft realized, because the technology has improved to this point now. There's some very robust looking metal hinges at the top and bottom of this. It's a complete screen unit on the left and right sides. There's no worry, as far as I can see, about the durability of the center screen. And it's about the size of like a small notebook, like a Moleskine. So if you can manage one of those in your bag, this would easily fit. And then the appeal of this to me is multitasking. So you've got 2 screens. And that's the problem I have with the cell phone experience. Like smartphones, they're absolutely fantastic for one task at a time. I multitask with mine because I'm always listening to either music or audiobooks. But to have one thing on one side and like have your email open and still be watching a YouTube video or doing something more productive than that, that's the dream for me with a portable device. Plus, this thing just kind of looks slick to me. And as maligned as the Windows Phone experience was, this is obviously nothing like that because this is Microsoft's very mature Android platform apps running on an Android device. And as much I loved Windows Phone when it came out, I was a user. I probably stuck with it about a year longer than I should have because there really wasn't the app support that I needed at the time. Sure. But I would love to get my hands on one of these and check it out. And I'm sure there will be, just like Surface is sort of the blueprint for how to construct a Microsoft like tablet device. I'm sure there will be third-party Surface Duo type devices out there running these Microsoft apps. So I'll try to get my hands on one of them.
It's interesting. Tom Warren wrote the hands-on for The Verge, and one of the things he does call out, because it looks a little big, but he said, my first impression was simple. It is so much smaller in person than it appears in photos. I wasn't allowed to play around with the software on this device, but I was able to slip it into my jeans pocket, and it's definitely the first pocketable Surface device. It looks and feels like a miniature tablet that's also a phone. And it's interesting because he talked a bit with Microsoft's chief product officer, Panos Panay, and he kind of disses the idea of smartphones and phablets. I don't know what these are. His goal was to not call it a phone at all. It's also interesting, to look at the device. I will say it looks like one of the smartest dual screen devices we've seen so far. The hinge is simple. They're not trying to extend the screen across the entire device. Very, very curious to see what the keyboard response is like when you're using the on-screen keyboard. This is, this is an interesting choice. And one of the things they point out is Androids, or I should say, Panay points out in the interview, is that they did this because in this form factor it works. Anything bigger than this, Windows, quote, Windows is everything. So, you'll be able to drag and drop content between apps. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. I'm watching this video and it would be great. I'm sure Microsoft would have loved it if they still had a viable mobile platform. And of course, if they really wanted to, they have the resources, they have the technology, they could make this into a Windows device, but that would require basically starting over again, and it would require a lot of the kind of intervention they had to do to begin with to get the third-party app support that they wanted, like when they wanted Instagram, when they wanted eBay, when they wanted other apps on the Windows platform. They basically had to incent those companies to do it, and then if they weren't continuing to do that for future updates, then the updates were never forthcoming. That's my politically correct way of saying it. So for this to be on the Android platform and for them to be constantly updating their own Android platform and iOS platform apps makes perfect sense to me. Like you said, like how well optimized is this? What kind of keyboarding experience might it be? That remains to be seen. From the video, it seems like the hinge is strong enough that it maintains an angle, so it might be like a little laptop if you need it to be. Be curious to see how it actually works in practice. Like, can I just hold this on one knee and use the bottom screen for a keyboard? Or
it's interesting. The pricing and ship date is pretty vague. Developers are going to have it on in a couple months, and he says, consumers will be super happy with the pricing. Quote, when I say happy, I think the value of the product you get for how much you're paying, it's there, and that's what matters to customers. So, it will be next year, and this is the final hardware as near as I can tell. But I think it's late 2020, but it's evasive enough that it could be earlier. But this apparently is final hardware, and they just want developers time to make apps for it. Be curious when they have some more solid information on those. As if we didn't have enough Apple news already in the past few weeks. The Ming-Chi Kuo, the renowned Apple analyst, as the crew at 9to5Mac call him, Apple to release iPhone SE2 in Q1 2020 with iPhone 8 design and A13 processor. I like the iPhone SE, and this will be a huge update. A13 processor, 3 gigabytes of RAM, in what amounts to an iPhone 8 configuration. So
the tradition of the SE is to merge different eras of iPhones together.
Right.
And the SE is a tank. I mean, it's still based on the iPhone 5 design, but it had, at the time, I believe it had the iPhone 6's SoC and the iPhone 5S's body with the camera of it, just whatever they had probably the most of, it seems. Even though these are devices that are made
to get the most affordable.
Right. Yeah, so it's just, hey, let's put this radio with this SoC in this case with this screen, and it works. And that phone has stuck around for a long time as the most affordable way to get yourself an iPhone. So
my wife loves her SE mostly because it's a small, and she doesn't even want a 5 or 6 inch screen. So that was the attraction for her. She's kind of thrilled at the form factor on that. It'd be interesting. The rumors are that they'll discontinue the iPhone 8 after this ships. $350, $400 for the price range on this. That would they've basically cut the iPhone 8. They eliminated the 128 and 256 gigabyte versions. You can basically get a 4.7 inch iPhone 8 with 64 gigabytes for $449. So it's easy to see they can keep the pricing fairly low on this. And I think one of the things that Benjamin Mayo over at 9to5Mac talks about is that this is really going to target 6 and 6 Plus users in no small part because they will not be able to upgrade to iOS 13 So if people are, in iOS 13 is going to be a requirement if you want Apple Arcade. So there's stuff going on here. There's plans. There's machinations.
I do have to say I like Apple's recent trend of pricing things more affordably. That new iPad that's out there,
Made you very happy.
Is it $329? So yeah, release new iPhones for less than $400. Unlocked. I approve.
I believe you are wearing the Corsair Virtuoso Rgb wireless and wireless SE headset. Or one of them. Is it the RGB or the non-glowy version?
Well, this is actually my trusty AKG headphones, but I have the boxes right here at hand. But if you've listened to this podcast in the last year or so, yeah, I know, fail. I thought about wearing it and using the mic. The mic is one of my complaints, but not because of its quality. It's just because of noise. But I'm in a quiet enough room; it probably would have been fine. We're talking about brand new ultra premium category gaming headsets from Corsair. And we've seen this ultra premium category before. We've talked recently about one with the planar magnetic drivers from Hyperx, which was a $300 version of a $400 headset from Odyssey. Yeah. And then we like earlier this year, we looked at the Asus ROG Delta headset, which is around $180 to $200 range. So now Corsair, which previously had kind of mid to high range headsets, but nothing I would consider ultra high quality, nothing really audiophile level. Very, very good stuff. In fact, the HS70 wireless, which was not even considered one of their most premium headsets, I looked at that about a year and a half ago, and that thing is absolutely fantastic for the money. But now they have something that squarely fits into the ultra premium category. In fact, the best constructed headsets I've ever used. And they went all out. To me, this is what the SE version especially, and I had the regular and the SE in for review. The SE version, imagine a high-end Sony closed back pair of headphones. Something with that kind of style. And there's so much aluminum. It's like the aluminum yokes and aluminum ear cups and aluminum on the both ends of the boom mic. The boom itself is a flexible material. It's like a rubber coated material. But then the microphone itself and the connector are made of aluminum. There's just milled aluminum with chamfered edges and all of this everywhere on this thing. And it feels like it. It doesn't have a really heavy weight to it because of the use of aluminum. Everywhere you would normally see some sort of metal reinforcing a gaming headset.
The cheap plasticky feel.
Absolutely. There's no creaking from these at all. Like you can twist them and move them around on your head. You don't hear anything. The only complaint I had about it was that because it's so strong, I think the break-in period on these is going to be a little bit longer. I spent some time stretching these out over a bookshelf speaker, and it did help with the clamping force. But right out of the box, they're a little stiff. The clamping force is a little tight, which is the pressure against your ears. So even though there's a lot of padding and they're using memory foam and a very comfortable sort of synthetic leather, there was just like the non-SE version is slightly less. The build quality is still high, but it's not quite as heavy, and the clamping force was lighter. The SE version, I think, will just take some more break-in. But the sound, of course, kind of important since these are headphones. Very, very clear. You hear 50 millimeter drivers in gaming headset, and I always think going to be some boosted bass response, maybe recessed mid-range, that kind of smile EQ where the bass is higher, the mid-range dips, and then it comes back up to the treble. These are absolutely not like that. But they don't really have any kind of accentuated frequencies at all. They're very flat, but they do roll off a lot faster down low than I thought they were going to. There's not really that low bass that you can feel. So for upper bass, mid-range, and very, very clear and pure treble, these are outstanding. So this driver design is very good. I almost wondered if it's the actual ear cup design that's inhibiting bass response on these. Maybe if it was slightly ported or ventilated in some way, it might have a little bit better response. But
that's probably, I mean, there's only so much you can do a lot with the enclosure in terms of tuning the bass, but there's only so much bass you can create with an enclosure. ...
Yeah.
You know, there's when you talk about like, are you talking about how? I mean, when did you do a frequency test? Did it start falling off at like 60, 50, 40, 30 hertz?
Just in listening to familiar material, I should listen to some test tones and do some measurements, but anything below 100, it was rapid roll off. Like, really? I don't think there was anything audible below 60. So if you were listening to like, yeah, no, it was pretty aggressive. Like if even some current popular Billboard Top 40 tracks like that, that low bass, which you can usually still hear in your car system without a subwoofer, that stuff you could just barely hear that sub bass line that's usually around 80 hertz or so. And, you know, if you're not a big bass head and what you're primarily doing is gaming and listening to music. Bass is a
big part of explosions.
It is, yeah. And unfortunately,
they're also claiming 20. I mean, you know what I mean? It's also, it's like, oh, it's 20,000, you know, it's 20 hertz to 40,000 hertz. So, you know, it's probably is -5, -10, -15 dB at 20 hertz. I mean,
yeah.
You know, I mean, $200 is not bad, but you can get a $75 set of headphones that do actually deliver decent bass. So that's a little frustrating. I will say the build quality looks nice, but you know, I don't know. Just to have something that's fairly neutral, period, is kind of a minor miracle in any headphone dedicated to the gaming market.
Agreed, and it had just oddly pure sound. It's hard to describe. You'd have to listen to a lot of headphones to know what I'm talking about. But when you hear something where, and I listen to a lot of jazz, where the cymbal sounds like a real cymbal in the room with you, and it's not exaggerated. Yeah. The decay was there. It's just all like audiophile type stuff. But they definitely nailed that. They need a revision 2 of this for that better bass response, I think. But the other problem is that they're not using any kind of familiar commercial software for surrounds effects. This is not like DTS or Dolby surround.
Right.
Because, of course, it's a gaming headset. It has to have some sort of simulated 7.1 channel effect. And it sounded bad. Anytime you engaged the effect at all of the audio got processed and sounded like it was coming out at like 128 kilobit MP3. It sounded super compressed and kind of artifacty. Like, this isn't worth it. It's not worth having this fake spatial effect if the audio suddenly sounds significantly lower than even streamed, you know, 256 music or a YouTube video. It was noticeable.
Sounds
even
like
watching a YouTube video, it got worse.
There.
Yeah, something was wrong. I hope it's just a software thing that they can fix. I pointed that out in the review. If you leave off the 7.1 effect, the sound is extremely neutral and clean. Just don't expect deep bass. And depending on what you listen to, you'll never even notice the deep bass, but definitely like modern, you know, pop music, you're going to notice that lack of thump. And the mic was good, but noisy.
When you say noisy, how was it noisy?
Okay, 2 ways. One, it's omnidirectional, so it was picking up noise from all over the room. And I tried to position it closer to my mouth to record some test audio. And then it was just an explosion of plosives and breathing sound. So I was trying to angle it in different directions, but essentially it was always either too close to my nose or too close to my mouth. And the farther away I moved it, the more room noise it picked up. So they need to work on that as well. Just including a screen filter would have helped, like a little foam filter in the box. But the clarity of the sound was good. It has way more bass than most boom mics, so there's potential there. So I think it's a good first effort from them, and astonishingly high build quality. So now that they've come out with this first ultra premium headset, I'd like to see just a little of those nagging complaints fixed the next time around. But it's still pretty.
More bass.
Yeah, just more bass. I should do an A/B between the 2 models because I did all of my listening testing with the SE. Considering they were identical on paper, and now the more I think about it, the other one having a plastic enclosure versus aluminum might affect that somewhat. And of course, I say that, and now there's a HyperX headset on the market that has adjustable base ports where you literally can
Those
slide
are
plastic.
often really, yeah. Sennheiser did that a couple of years ago, and it's one of those ideas that is a wonderful theory and certainly sells headphones to a certain part of the market, but generally does not do anything for the quality of the bass. It's my experiences with adjustable bass ports on headphones have not been encouraging. Let's just say it.
Okay.
Let's just say it like that. It's tough, and there's no reason they couldn't have figured out a better way to skin that particular cat that sounds better. One question: are these 3.5 millimeter, or are these like self-powered? Are these running off a USB?
I should have covered that right off the bat. They're wireless with a 2.4 gigahertz dongle that uses the Corsair Slipstream wireless codec, or the format that they use. But then it's also wired USB-C. And it has a 3.5 millimeter input, so you can do a normal like analog input from, a game controller or something. So it covers all the bases. They advertise these as being PlayStation 4 compatible, PC, use them wirelessly. I will say wired USB was by far the best sound. The 2.4, the wireless was fine, but there was a significant reduction in quality going from wired to wireless.
Interesting. There's no reason that should be, but I wonder what that's all about. Huh. Interesting. So, Gold Award?
Yeah, I mean, I weighed the build quality and the purity of the sound pretty heavily. And, it reads like a product that either doesn't get an award at all, or maybe it would be a silver level. But in the end, it was like, really, if you're not listening to music with the deep, low thumping sub type bass, when I was listening to jazz, for example, you never hear that. Even from the double bass, it's usually around 120 hertz.
Preservation Hall Jazz Band, tubas go down to like, a B flat, open B flat on a tuba is like 34 hertz.
Okay, let me rephrase
there's
that.
A big chunk.
If you're listening to something that was engineered by Rudy Van Gelder, you will not be missing anything. Because Mr. Van Gelder did not believe in a huge dynamic range or a lot of low bass. The bass usually sounds like it's in a closet in the back of the studio somewhere, and the piano is inside of a cardboard box. But the horns are always front and center, and those sounded absolutely amazing.
That's just complicated and an intellectual debate I'm not ready to get into.
We're not even going to talk about his early 2000s remasterings either, when he lost most of his ability to hear high frequencies and boosted them up to the moon. But
that's awkward. Oh my goodness. Amazon has come up with their new IP accelerator. I brought this up because occasionally we talk about fraud on Amazon, or for example, why we buy certain things directly and only with Amazon fulfillment, like memory cards. The IP accelerator, quote, connecting small and medium-sized businesses with a group of law firms that specialize in trademarks and IP. Sellers who participate in the program, whether their products are available on Amazon's retail stores or not, get discounted rates from the law firms. Once they file for trademarks, they receive access to Amazon's suite of fraud prevention tools. Having had some friends or associates that have had to deal with being ripped off by fake products, copy products, clone products, I think it's a nice thing for Amazon to do, especially given that Amazon has been challenged at some times. Or has had challenges or been challenged with or just had difficulties responding to stolen designs or stolen property, or I should say stolen product ideas. So making the ability to protect your IP more accessible, I think, is a nice thing for Amazon to do, and hopefully will lead to less fraudulent products on the site. And the other thing that struck me this week, what I'm affectionately thinking of as Luckey Palmer 2.0, is if you haven't been following what he's been up to, he's they just got a big military contract, and they raised about, I want to say, $120 million this summer, perhaps more. But it is a drone that is designed for military purposes to attack drones that may be doing nefarious things. They call it the Interceptor. Underreal Industries. It's been around for about 2 years, about 130 employees, and $120 million they raised this summer. But they're essentially are building surveillance systems, and building what they call a computer-operated weapon. And it is essentially designed to go after drones that have been, for example, converted into relatively inexpensive ways to deliver nefarious payloads or spying on military bases. And I thought this was kind of fascinating. And the video, if you can catch the videos of it, is rather striking, to say the least. So, but yeah, they started, I want to say they got the first contract in 2017 with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. And, I'm very curious to see how this works out and how it works out in the field. So, but essentially the idea is that it's going to go up there and take out, I don't even know how to, you sort of target the drone that is not supposed to be in your airspace. The interface, where is it? Quote, a prompt appeared on screen asking for permission to attack. You tap a button, and then this drone that they're building, the interceptor, basically whacks into the drone that is violating your airspace at 100 miles an hour, and then everything falls to the ground. It, quote, it finds targets and steers towards them on their own. So, good write-up by Joshua Brustein up at Bloomberg. But I just thought that was an interesting update on what's going on with Luckey Palmer, who, if you don't remember, is the founder of Oculus.
Hey, have you seen those handheld drone guns? Like Drone Shield is the link I put into the chat, but these massive anti-drone guns, they look like assault rifles, but all they do is, you aim it at the drone and just bring it down to the ground. Like you take over the drone and land it.
It looks like some sort of bizarre variance of the BFG from insert your favorite video game. Yep. DroneShield.com, the Drone Gun Tactical. It looks utterly ridiculous. But if it works,
hey, in their product video, it works perfectly, Patrick.
Right.
And who are you going to believe? If you can't believe the advertising, then what can we believe?
Well, what's interesting, right? This is essentially they're zapping a whole bunch of RF frequencies like 433, 915, 2.4, 5.8 gigahertz, or some of the optional ones. I also. The language is also kind of awesome. It allows for a controlled management of drone payloads such as explosives with no damage to common drone models or surrounding environment due to the drones generally responding via a vertical controlled landing on the spot or returning back to the starting point, which helps to assist to track down the operator. So
my only concern about this sort of technology is that when Amazon eventually goes to some sort of all drone powered same day delivery service, what if somebody just camps out at the end of the street and draws all the Amazon packages to his own car and then drives off into the sunset?
Well, that'll be the interesting question. There's also some questions whether these work in certain situations. I don't know. I'm kind of fascinated.
It'd be the ultimate con. You give somebody a drone for Christmas, and then when they go out to use it, you're hiding in the bushes with the anti-drone and just ruining their experience. Not that I would ever do anything like this, or am planning it at all.
Well, I think it depends on the device, the drone's response to the signal they're setting out. Because the idea is that, if things, if they're doing what I think they're doing, essentially it's going to be dependent on whether Amazon programs a drone to go back to its, delivery truck, or to gently set itself down. Yeah, I'm amused. It also, because the giant antenna looks, again, like some particularly insane BFG. Oh, look, it's the individual wearable drone detector, which I believe is Molly compatible. This Week in Computer Hardware, it's a weekly show. We talk about all sorts of hardware, a lot of desktops, a lot of laptops, a lot of phones. We like consoles, too. We love gaming. We're talking about other things. We love to hear your questions. Twitch, TWiCH, at twit.tv is the email address. The handsome man with red hair is Sebastian Peak, editor-in-chief of PCPer.com. My name is Patrick Norton. I co-host this and other podcasts, and we want to thank you for listening. If you're watching the video, the page you're looking at right now is twit.tv/Twitch, where you can find all of our older episodes and all the different formats you can subscribe in. Boy, all of the different formats you can subscribe in, and information on how to subscribe, or just search for This Week in Computer Hardware on your favorite podcatcher. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Patrick Norton.
And I'm Sebastian Peak.
We'll catch you next week on Twitch.